Yo guys, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm doing my review of Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 of the Stormlight archive, and one of my favorite books I've read so far this year. Originally, I had already started making this video, and actually made a good way through it, but then things happen, and I mean, if you look at my uploads, haven't been able to do anything in a couple of weeks. So I don't remember where I was at. So I'm just going to start over fresh and give you guys this banger review. If you guys do go on to enjoy, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, maybe that's something you're interested in. I'm not sure. And if you want to talk more with some cool people about some books, manga, music, whatever, be sure to join the Discord in the description below. So I'm not going to dilly-dally too much. Let's get right into it. So this book picks up right after, or like within the week of the end of Way of Kings. So there's not much, time in between them. We're dealing directly with the effects, the aftermath of the ending of Way of Kings. Of course, there's that big plateau battle against the Parshendi. Dalinar gets betrayed and all that. You guys remember Kaladin is now officially a high-ranking member of Dalinar's army. He releases all the slaves and stuff that were in Sidaeus' army, and they're being integrated into Dalinar's war camp. And on the flip side of things, of course, Shallan and Jasnah are making their way towards the Shattered Plains. Now that we know that the both of them have some powers, they can do some things. They let each other in on some secrets that they both have. And, obviously there's something special with Shallan. And she's obviously in the same situation as Kaladin as far as their powers. So I'm not going to go through and talk about the plot super heavily, just because there's so much here. It's a very dense book, and if I did want to go through the plot, it would take me all day. So I'm just going to tell you guys parts that I liked, maybe didn't like as much, and different character progressions that I did really like throughout this book. Some big moments and all that. So of course, as with all of my reviews, they are spoiler reviews. So if you guys haven't seen it, or not seen it, but read it, maybe skip off this one. But I will say, just like a TLDR, if you liked Way of Kings, you're going to love this one. It's a little bit more faster pace than Way of Kings. It's still what I would consider a slow burn. It's a slower paced book, but it's considerably faster. I will say, I absolutely love Way of Kings. It's one of my favorite books of all time after reading it. But it is extremely slow. This one's just much faster in my opinion. And it has some really awesome reveals and some awesome moments as well. So firstly, let's probably talk about the biggest highlight of this book, Shallan. I'm gonna be honest, in Way of Kings, I did not like Shallan, really, whatsoever. She had some moments towards the end of the book, the end of Way of Kings, that were pretty cool and interesting, but her whole character was basically confined to this one area where she was just studying, and it was a bit repetitive, and I didn't feel like there was much being done with her character. And every time it was a Shallan chapter, I would count the pages and just be like, when's the next Kaladin or Dalinar chapter? I did not really find her interesting until stuff starts to move along in the second half of Way of Kings. Luckily, in this book, with her being the focus of this book, with her flashback chapters and whatnot, I was a little hesitant and scared that I wouldn't like this book as much, though everybody claims that this is the best in the the Stormlight Archive. There's a lot of people who think that this is their favorites, think it's the best. So I had high hopes, but at the same time I was hesitant, with Shallan being the focus. But I was pleasantly surprised. Shallan is freaking dope. She went from being one of my least favorite characters to like jumping up there among the ranks of Kaladin and Dalinar. There really wasn't any characters or like POV characters that I disliked. Well, there was POV characters I disliked, but there wasn't any POV that was uninteresting to read in this book. So I did really enjoy that. Shallan did a complete 180, and at about 30%, maybe, halfway through the book, she does something just out of nowhere, completely insane, that had me shooketh. You know what I mean? Like, Shallan is freaking dope. And by the end of the book, you know, just so much crazy stuff happens with them finding the hidden city or whatever, and all that stuff. So yeah, Shallan also discovering more of her powers with light weaving and her radiant stuff. Yeah, her character just does a complete 180 and became one of my favorites. Another character that did, in my opinion, almost a complete 180 was Adolin. I liked parts of Adolin's character in the first book. He was just a brat, though. He really was. I didn't like how he was treating my boy Kaladin, because Kaladin is my homes, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, Adolin is kind of a douchebag. He's a prick. He's a rich boy, that kind of deal. But he was somewhat honorable. And you know, the little pieces that we would read from his point of view in the first book were understandable, you know, somewhat. But at the same time, he was also kind of a dick. In this book, though, we do get a little bit of dickish Adolin, but his character gained a lot of respect for him in this book, especially after the whole Honor is Dead battle. Oh my god, speaking of that, yeah, that part where Adolin has to duel like 4 shard bearers at once, and then, your homie Kaladin pops in, and they do the whole thing. Oh my god, bro. That was one of the best moments in the entire book, and it was electric. I tell you what, like, my hair on my arms was standing up. I had goosebumps when Dalinar said the thing, and Kaladin was like, Honor is dead, or whatever. Oh my god, bro. What a fire moment, by the way. And especially how all that stuff turned out pretty poorly for Kaladin, and how Adolin reacted and all that. Just gained a lot of respect for him. And, you know, with him at the very, very end of the book, he does something, murking Sadeas' ass, bro. Holy, like, bro. This book has some insane moments, and some characters, like, oh my god. I can't even, bro. This is just such a fantastic book. All of the characters have, like, these insane, just out of nowhere moments, that I absolutely love. Shallan being a shard bearer, holy shit. Then you got Adolin murking Sadeas at the end of the book, out of nowhere. Wasn't expecting that. So obviously that's going to have some consequences. And Oathbringer, but also him kind of being bros with Kaladin now. Because at first they were kind of rivals, but more douchey towards each other. But now they're more like friendly, brotherly rivals in a way. So, yeah, I'm digging Adolin now. He's not as much of a douchebag. Moving on, we're going to talk about my homeboy Kaladin. Still, by the end of this book, still my favorite character. And easily one of my favorite characters in fiction. He's just so cool. You guys know, if you've been around here for a while, and know me personally, you guys know I love a good slave arc in my fiction. it's just one of the most compelling parts about a character when they go through that kind of arc. I mean, it was done to perfection in Vinland Saga. It was done very well in Saxon Tales. I just think that arc is really dope. When, you know, one of your main characters is taken down a notch, you know, broken down a peg, you know what I'm saying, and forced to dehumanize themselves in a way. And they're sort of a husk of what they were. Just what it does to a character. And I mean, I'm sure what it does to people in real life, in history, is, you know, obviously terrible. But when you get to read about it, and especially when it concerns such a badass character, like, you know, Thorfinn or Uhtred or Kaladin, just seeing how they get back out of it and go back to being a badass is really compelling. And especially with how a slave arc is usually paired with a revenge quest. The slave arc either being a result of or a driving force of the revenge arc, which revenge quests are another one of my absolute favorite things. Obviously, you know, revenge isn't something you should really go after, but I won't lie, when you got a dope character, you know, just murking everybody trying to get his revenge, it is cool as shit, dude. Like, it's one of my favorite arcs and character tropes, just in general. So in this book with Kaladin, I went off on a little tangent there. With Kaladin, probably the most interesting part is him sort of trying to adjust to this new life, and still, like, he's free, and him and his homies are free, but still that residual resentment and that residual fear of being a slave, and just all of those instincts and feelings that have just been ingrained into him after being dehumanized for so long, and being felt, you know, being a slave and dealing with, you know, PTSD and depression and just his mental state, you know, just trying to adjust to a life of freedom, while still holding on to those feelings. That's one of the most interesting parts about his arc, and especially with how the power system works in the series. With being a Radiant, he has to let go in order to progress and get stronger and get more cool abilities and stuff. So, you know, with him holding on to all that resentment and stuff, he can't progress. And in fact, he starts to slide back into his former self, especially after the whole Honor is Dead fight and he goes to prison, which was just crazy. Him sliding back into his former self, and losing his bond with Syl was devastating. But yeah, just him trying to build himself back out of that hole once again, is awesome. Like, Kaladin, fantastic character, fantastically written. I love reading about just his struggle. You know, he's cynical. He's definitely a downer, but it's also, you know, the burden of leadership is another aspect of his character, that I always think is really interesting to read about. Of course, the burden of leadership is a heavy theme in Red Rising. That's another series I'm reading at the moment, with Darrow, you know. Same thing here with Kaladin. It's just a very interesting thing to read about that you just never would know unless you're put in that situation. And of course, I mean, we can't talk about Kaladin without talking about the final battle and the dope duels that happen with him. Of course, Szeth was one of my favorite characters from the first book. He was just so mysterious and interesting and badass. You know, he's the assassin in white, just sticking to the ceiling, slashing hoes with the shard blade, taking their souls and stuff. It's just metal. So, halfway through the book, or probably even less than halfway, when he pops up out of nowhere and tries to mess with Kaladin, and Kaladin fends him off, seeing this usually stoic and just merciless character being, again, knocked down a peg, and sort of panic and be like, oh no, this is not good, was also really interesting. I was awaiting, obviously they had their first little battle, and I was awaiting that rematch the entire book. And obviously by the end it does not disappoint. The Szeth Kaladin duel is awesome. The duel in the sky and stuff, and they were just flying around. And of course, what leads up to that, when Kaladin's about to get murked by Moash. Speaking of Moash, screw that dude. I know everybody says F Moash, that's like a thing. It's true. Moash can blow a donkey chode. You know what I'm saying? And I knew something was up with him from the very beginning. Obviously, him being so strong-willed, and butting heads with Kaladin, and then becoming one of his best men. I knew that there was some friction there, and just the way that he's described and written, I knew there was something up from the very beginning, and that he was going to be a problem maker, a troublemaker. What am I saying? So yeah, I knew something was going to happen with him. And everybody says, F Moash, makes sense. But yeah, everything that happens there at the end, Kaladin's about to die, and then Syl comes in clutch, and then he goes God mode. He enters creative mode, you know what I'm saying? Just awesome scene. Everything leading up to it, trying to save the king and all that. It's that whole final arc of this book, the final act, is just amazing. Speaking of Kaladin, though, there's another character that I want to talk about, and that is the swordsman guy, the trainer. I did a little bit of research. I don't know if it's technically spoilers or not, but apparently his name is Vasher. He's a world hopper, an insanely powerful character from Warbreaker, but he came to Roshar. I'm not sure if that's actually like a heavy reveal spoiler thing, or if that's just kind of a throwaway detail. I don't know. I don't really care though. It adds to how cool his character is, but it doesn't really bother me. Him and Kaladin, their little thing they got going on, I think is really interesting. I like the idea of him kind of being a bad monk, or a bad. Well, I guess they're kind of like monks. All of them are very pious and stuff, and he's just kind of a sloppy, doesn't really care, apathetic monk. But he's secretly a badass. That's really cool. And I like how him and Kaladin, I feel are gonna kind of have a bit of a training arc, which, that's another part of stories that I usually like. Whenever our character gets beaten down, and then he's like, okay, yeah, I need to go train. And especially when it was originally offered to Kaladin, he's like, no, I'm not training with you. And then after he gets messed up, he comes back to him, and he's like, I'm gonna need that training. And I just think that that's really cool. I hope we get to see more of that in Oathbringer as well. Now I'm going to talk about Dalinar. There's not much more to his character, I'd say, than what was in the first book. I'd say he's about relatively the same, still struggling, trying to unite the kingdom or whatever, all the high princes. I think he came in clutch, though, finally trusting Kaladin about Amaram and all that. W Dalinar, man. Dalinar is just the GOAT. He's one of my favorite characters. And at the very end, he captures the Stormfather pretty much. So, I mean, if you think about Stormlight, like Pokemon, bro just captured, like, Mewtwo, pretty much. Like, he just got a legendary Pokemon. All these other dudes, they got, like, normal Pokemon. Dalinar just caught a legendary, so I think that that's dope. Him basically capturing the Stormfather and bonding with it. That's dope. He basically has the most powerful Spren, and nobody can match him. So that's pretty cool. Going into Oathbringer, I'm interested to see how that plays out. And especially because of the Stormfather being, I forget what the order of the Radiance is called, but they're a really weird order and very particular because there can only be like 3 of them, and they have certain abilities that are different from the rest. So he's technically not as powerful, but at the same time, he has other things going on that make him more special. I'm not sure how exactly it works. I've done little bits and pieces of research, but yeah, I'm just excited to see how that plays out with him bonding to the freaking Stormfather. Like, that's dope. Dalinar the GOAT. The last couple of characters I want to talk about, I mean, Wit, of course, Wit being, Hoyd or whatever. Very interesting. Still don't know exactly what his master plan is, his goal, because obviously, I mean, if you know about the Cosmere, we know Wit is extremely powerful, and he's got to be planning something in the background, but what exactly that is, who knows? So I'm just interested to see what he's doing. Of course, at the very end of the book, find out Jasna's still kicking. Who would have thought? Like, the whole time, Jasna's dead. Yeah, right. I knew she was alive the whole time. Like, somebody like Jasna doesn't just die. You know what I mean? So I knew she was kicking the whole time, but them two interacting at the end of the book was pretty funny. So seeing what they're about to do, who knows, that's probably going to be pretty interesting. Also seeing Eshonai. Eshonai ended up being one of my favorite characters from this book. Of course, we followed Zeth just like for like maybe 2 chapters, I think. But they were like interlude chapters, I think. But where we would have followed Zeth in the first book, we follow Eshonai in this book. And she was really awesome. I really enjoyed following her and actually getting, a look into how the Parshendi actually are. Because the Parshendi left a lot of questions unanswered in the first book. And this, just being able to follow Eshonai, at least, like, even in, like, the first couple of chapters we follow her, there's already so many questions that are answered just by following her for a couple of chapters. I still do have quite a few questions, but a lot was answered, and she's just a dope character. I really like her and the conflict with the Parshendi and all that. All that is just awesome. So overall, I mean, it's obvious that I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. Who would have thought? However, something that might surprise a lot of people, I do really love this book. However, I think I might like The Way of Kings more still. I'm not sure. Like, I acknowledge that Words of Radiance is probably the objectively better book. However, I think I have more emotional attachment to The Way of Kings than this book. Partly because Kaladin is the main focus. Getting all of, like, Kaladin's backstory stuff, and also just his struggle as a slave, and the whole mental aspect of it. Like, I was on board with The Way of Kings as soon as the part happened, where he's standing over the chasm contemplating killing himself. So I was completely on board, like, once we got that scene in Way of Kings. Before that, I was a little iffy. I wanted to be invested in the series, but there is a bit of a learning curve. with the Way of Kings. You're just thrown right into it. There's a bunch of terminology. You have so many questions. You don't know what's going on. And I honestly was questioning whether or not this book would be for me, or this series, rather. I really wanted to like it, but the Kaladin scene, that sold me. Yeah, it just hit me hard. One of my favorite scenes. Yeah, but also just like seeing his whole arc as a slave in the first book meant a lot more to me than I think his character in this book. And not to say that I didn't like his character in this book, because I absolutely loved it and the unique struggle he goes through. But I think the part of his arc in the first book is what I like more. In the finale at the end, with all of them being trapped on the plateau and stuff, was just very grand and far more desperate feeling than the battle at the very end of this book. I mean, obviously, there was like, it was very desperate feeling in this book. We didn't know, oh, were they going to win or not. But just the way it was described, it just seemed like they had way more backup. You know, obviously got people with like basically superpowers at this point. And so it felt a lot less raw, I guess. The very end of the first book, that whole battle felt like they're literally all going to die. What is going to happen? In this book, it didn't leave much to be guessed about, because, I don't know, it just felt less desperate. Not to detract from how cool the battle was, because it was an awesome battle. And of course, he got Shallan working on the sidelines, trying to figure out the whole portal situation, which that was interesting. That was cool. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I have more emotional attachment to the first book versus this book, but I do recognize that this second book is probably objectively better. And like I said towards the beginning of the book, or the beginning of the video, Words of Radiance has some things over Way of Kings. I mean, Shallan just becoming a better character. At like basically the beginning of the book, Shallan is already a better character than she was in the first book. So that improved the book heavily, or improved the series heavily, I should say. And also the pacing being, in my opinion, a lot quicker than the first book also improved it in a lot of ways too. So yeah, that's why I say Words of Radiance is probably better. So yeah, that's going to be about it for the video. That's really all I got to say. I'm completely sold on Stormlight now, and just the Cosmere in general. I mean, after reading this, Sanderson's got to be a favorite author of mine. You know, I always say Bernard Cornwell is probably my favorite author, and then George R.R. Martin. However, I mean, at this point, Sanderson's probably my favorite author. I'm gonna keep it a buck with you guys. I'm loving the Stormlight archive, and I haven't felt this way about a series in a long time. Just it being so dense, there's just so much to it, you know. I'm just fully invested in the lore, and it just feels like I'm a part of something so much larger. Now, there are other series that I enjoy a lot as of recently. Like, I'm really digging Red Rising right now. Fully on board with that. Fully invested. But obviously, it's not as broad as the Cosmere. I mean, the Cosmere is an entire expanded universe. And, you know, being a part of that community, people that like Sanderson, reading his stuff, the Cosmere people, I don't know what his community is called, but it just feels like I'm a part of something so much larger, which I really enjoy, and I am very much loving my experience. So yeah, I'm gonna be reading Oathbringer probably sometime this summer. I'm gonna give it a little while between this book and the next book, just because they are so large. Take the time to read some other things. But yeah, hopefully I get caught up by December, so that, you know, either in December or January next year, get on board with Wind and Truth. That's my big goal. So thank you all for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if you guys did enjoy, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.